So last time we did our first square, we've got the gray outside and the color on the inside. We can either put a square here in this space, which means we cast on and then pick up stitches. We can pick up our stitches and then cast on. This is the square we're going to do this session. This one right here. So we have the stitch marker in our loop, in our very last loop. So we're going to go in right through that loop. And we're going to pick up and knit, which means we put our needle in through the stitch and bring our working yarn through. As I said, I like to weave in ends as I go. So we're going to put this end up over the top of our working yarn and pick up a stitch. Now, as I'm looking at this very edge stitch between these two garter rows, I pick up the bottom leg, or the leg closest to me. Put the working yarn, put the colored yarn over the top, the colored tail over the top. Now, as you can see, my gray yarn tail has gotten a little bit short. So I'm going to pull that back down a little bit. Let that tighten up a little bit about around those two stitches. Working yarns over the top, ready to get my pick up my next stitch. I think it makes it a little bit easier, especially on this direction. I don't have as much of an issue on these sides, but as I'm working this long side, it seems, or this side, the kind of the left side of the square, yeah. And we can tell that's the back. We can tell the front from the back. Okay, so the left side I find a little bit more challenging to just go in from here to get that stitch right there. So I want to, it's easier, a little bit easier I think, to lift it like this than using my fingers to kind of hold it up, go in through the other. But I need to pull my working yarn up, my tail up first over my working yarn. So I make sure I weave that in. Alright, now tail over the top of my working yarn, the yarn I'm adding in. Now I'm going to switch to English for those of you who knit English style. Again, I'm going to pull up that bottom stitch, hold on to it. Now I made sure that tail's gotten a little short again. Okay, so I go in, wrap it around, whoops, lost it, wrap it around, coming out. Now, my tail needs to go over the top of my working yarn. Okay, that's how I do it if I'm doing English. As I'm going, where I'm picking up my stitches is the stitch in between these knit ridges, right on the edge. So I go in between each garter edge. In between each garter edge and pick up a stitch. Alright, so I'm just going to keep doing that while I weave my end in until I get to the end and I have 22 stitches. Weaving in my end as I go. Alright. Let's give that a tug to keep it nice and long, and let's count how many stitches we have. 2, 4, oh, we're not doing 22. I don't know why I said you need 22 stitches. Oh, because that's what I usually do. But for this one, we are doing 16. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. 16, and that 16th went right in between those two. Now, I do need my center stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up that stitch right there on the end, and that is going to become my center stitch. Like I said, usually I use these. These are what I happen to have in my bowl today. So I'm going to stick that right around there and make sure I have my center stitch marked. Now I'm going to cast on. I'm going to turn my work around to the back, and because I like to do the cable cast on, I'm going to cast on 16 more stitches. So the first one's going to be a knit stitch. 1, then in between those 2 stitches, 2, in between again, in between again, 3, and then just continuing on to 16. I'm going to turn it back around to the front because it's just a little bit easier to see this stitch. That's the center stitch right there, so we're not going to count that one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Alright, so I'm just knitting all the way back across. So then I have my 16 cast on. This is going to be my first wrong side row. and I'm just going to knit all of these stitches. So, okay, now as I'm coming to this very last stitch, I want to be careful because it's really loose. So now I'm going to turn around and I'm ready for my first decrease row. My first right side decrease row. My first right side row was my cast on. My first wrong side row was coming back across. Now again I'm going to just put my tail over the top because I'm going to weave these in as I go. So I'm only going to knit 15 before I'm one stitch before my center stitch. And I'm not quite one stitch. There we go. Now I am. One stitch before my center stitch. So I'm going to, and we'll double check that. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. Take my 2, slip them as if to knit, going right into that right in there. So I'm taking my 2, slipping them as if to knit, not knitting them, slipping them as if to knit, then knitting this one, then passing those 2 stitches right over the top. Then that leaves 15, 2, 3, 15. All right. So, have the first decrease done. Now, time to do the second wrong side row, and I just knit all the way back across this. And all my ends are woven in. All right. So I just finished my second wrong side row here, so you can see the whole thing. Now we're going to turn it around, and remember this is our last right side row with the gray, and we've got the decrease in the middle there, that stitch right here. But I can always double check with counting, and I have 14 that I need to do this time. So we'll count 1, 2, 3, 12, 13, 14. That's one stitch before the center stitch right here. So here's our center stitch. We've got one stitch before the center stitch right here, and then one stitch after, which is going to be our decrease. So these 3 stitches right there are going to be our decrease stitches. I'm going to slip these first 2 as if to knit together. I mean, as if I'm knitting 2 together, but I'm going to just slip them. Knit 1, slip the 2 over the top. And then we have 14 more to knit. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So all the way to the end of this row, and then back across the back. And I'll see you when I get there. Okay. So we are finished with our last stitch, our last row of the gray. Trim off the end there. I guess if I was going to say kind of how I measure it and how I tell, I kind of have this length be just about as long as the square beneath it or next to it. Just I found that easy for how long to leave this so that it works and isn't too long. Our next color that we're going to be adding in is this purple velvet from Colorful Eclectic. Purple velvet from Colorful Eclectic, and this is her Elation sock. So 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and the colorway purple velvet. I had a nice big roll of this one. I used it for my toes, heels, and cuffs, so I've had quite a bit of this left over to do other things with. All right. So I'm done with my gray for right now. Time to start my purple. And this is added in like we've added in all our other colors. Have this be just about as long. And I'm going to take my first stitch of the purple velvet, then I'm going to grab my gray tail, put it over the top of my working yarn, and start knitting away. Again, working my gray yarn in, checking really quickly since I've got a couple of stitches and can still pull some out that my purple is long enough. Ready to bring my working yarn, my tail up over the top of my working yarn, back up, and this way I just weave these in. Again, it takes a little bit longer than just knitting straight across. Then my ends are all going to be woven in, so I find it worth it. Alright, I'm at my center stitch right here. I am ready to slip two, knit one, slip those two over the top. Now earlier in one of my other tutorials, I talked about how I will move this stitch marker sometimes up. So I'm going to do that right now. I've just taken it off and I'm going to put it right around the neck of the stitch that I just made. Right around the neck of the stitch that I just made. Then I'm going to do my last 13 stitches until I get to the edge. And now I'm at this edge. I'm going to turn my work, and because I don't do the purl stitch, I just knit straight across back to the beginning. And I'll see you when I get there. We finished that first wrong side row with our color, our main color. We're going to go around. Now, as I knit this second row of the main color, I'm going to be weaving in this tail. Up, then back over, then up again, back over the top, just weaving it basically under and over the working yarn as I form this row. I'm going to keep knitting all the way across, doing my decrease in the middle when I get to one before my center stitch, then working my decrease over these 3 center stitches right here, over these 3 center stitches, and then I'm going to knit back across when I'm done. And I'm just going to keep going, weaving in, and not weaving in the ends, I won't have any ends on my next rows, but keep going with that same pattern, working the center decrease and then knitting across the back until I'm at the end of this square, and I will meet you there. So I'm going to pause right here and just show you really quickly how nice and neat the back of these squares looks right here. I have all my ends woven in, and so when I get done with these, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about weaving in the ends. I'm good to go. So again, I'm going to keep going back and forth until I'm all out of stitches. I'll meet you there. Okay, so we have 3 stitches left. We're right at the very end of this square. We're going to do our very last decrease, slipping 2, knitting 1, then passing those slip stitches over the top. All right. And taking our stitch marker and putting it right through, holding on to that stitch. Okay, so there's our first 2. The next square in our tutorial is that one right there, the one that goes up on top. So we'll be casting on and then picking up across, and I'll see you then. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found value in this tutorial. If you have, please consider a one-time payment via PayPal or a regular subscription via Patreon. The links are down below and they are on the screen. Again, thank you for joining me. See you next time.